And welcome along to episode 4 of the Audere Academy in conversation with, and a big shout out to all our listeners on the Actors Toolkit podcast. Today we are joined by the lovely casting director, Lainey Lipson. Lainey, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me here.
No, we're delighted to have you. So we're going to have a wee chat today about basically casting in the UK and what it's like at the moment. So first of all, do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about Lainey? Who is Lainey Lipson, and a bit about your career so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, my career in casting began back in Los Angeles, actually, which is where I'm from. I'm from California. I started out actually as an actor when I was a younger person and ended up kind of reading in for casting directors, assisting ad hoc, and doing sort of assistance as I could. And basically from there, I ended up then taking a leap into full-time casting. And so I've been doing that for several years now. Worked for several offices over in LA. Then in 2020, I actually moved over to the UK. And since then, I've been doing various kinds of TV shows, films, everything under the sun, really, for a variety of casting directors. But mostly working with Rose Wicksteed and Sophie Kingston-Smith. They're the people who I've primarily been alongside, and yeah, doing lots of different TV shows, searches, feature films, some commercials here and there, podcasts as well. So yeah, a whole variety.
Fantastic. And what are you working on at the moment? Can you tell us anything about what you're working on at the moment?
So I'm doing some personal projects at the moment, and then probably hopping into some more TV as this year goes on. But yeah, it's been pretty wild. I came off of a couple of really large projects earlier in this year. One big TV show for Hulu. I can't say what it is, unfortunately, but that was a really great experience. A lot of different kinds of roles. A feature film that's a major studio feature, which was really great to work on as well. Totally different style of casting than I've done before as well, which it was really exciting. And then working on some searches as well for various TV shows out of the US.
Yeah, good stuff. Excellent. Okay. Well, here's the big juicy question. What is your opinion on how the industry has changed post-pandemic?
So post-pandemic, I think majorly what has changed is kind of the broad variety of people casting looks at. I would say looking into Europe, if you're in the UK, I think that's a really big thing that wasn't as possible before. So having the more ability to get self-tapes from people from around the world, the ability for people to reach out directly to casting, I think has changed a bit as well because of needing that connection, still wanting to maintain those relationships, even though we've not been able to see people in person. And I think also, yeah, just the whole virtual side of things has really grown, and been a really essential thing for us as casting to be able to still connect with people, even though it's changed the game for a lot of actors and made things sometimes more difficult for some actors and then easier for other actors. So it's about finding the balance now, in the industry of doing a fair amount of in-person work, but also keeping things virtual so we can keep those opportunities up on a more broad basis.
Yeah, obviously it's great that so many actors can now be seen for jobs that in the past they probably hadn't because of location or because of, things going on in their life. Do you find that the casting, this is a bonus question, do you find that the casting side of it has become less creative with the amount of admin involved in going through auditions and stuff now? Or do you still enjoy the creative process?
I think it varies from project to project, to be honest, because I feel like some projects you have a little bit more space and time to work on things in a more creative way. Like a feature film, you're going to have a bit more time to go through roles and really search for that right person for that role. Meanwhile, for TV, we're on such tight timelines that sometimes it causes us to have to make these really fast decisions and go through things in a more machine sort of process.
Yeah.
So it's challenging because it really depends on the project and their requirements and their timelines. But I would say for the most part that it's been really good to obviously see more people and to be able to have that more expansive view, but it has caused a lot of like uploading, downloading, creating like these pitch packets basically to send onto the studio, which we do anyway, and that's what we did before, but basically it's added a lot more admin throughout the day. I wouldn't say it takes away from the creativity, but it's definitely added a new element of work for us that I don't think we had as much before.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I definitely miss as an agent speaking to casting directors on the phone. It just seems that everybody's so busy now. We don't really have time for that. But so when you're talking about self tapes, there obviously that's become a massive thing post pandemic. Like I say, more actors are able to be seen, and people can audition without having to leave their home. So it's a lot handier for actors. What do you think
Yeah.
makes the ideal self tape audition?
I think a really good self tape for me is someone who comes in with confidence. They don't have to be 100% perfect in their lines. They don't need to be 100% perfect in their appearance or whatever. As long as they come in really confident, come in with their setup fully done, come in feeling like they have prepared and like they are really aware of this character, their intentions, and what they're trying to achieve at the end of this scene. I think that's what makes a really good self tape. I think just really putting in the practice beforehand, it really shows for us either on a self tape or in the room,
Mhm.
whatever it is. But yeah, I think making sure you have a setup as well that you feel comfortable, and always making sure that whenever you can have a reader in whatever form, whether that's having someone who's in person with you across from your computer or your phone or whatever you're recording on, and also having someone, abroad, even having someone read in with you virtually is fine for us as well. It's just as long as we get that connection. So I think having a connection and the presence and the confidence is makes a really strong self tape for us.
Yeah, yeah. One question that a lot of our actors tend to ask is, what are your views on actors using props and costume elements in their self tapes?
Yeah, for me, I would say there's a point where you can go too far for sure. I personally like a subtle nod to what you're going to be doing. So, like, say you are someone who is, part of the police force or something like that, dressing in like navy blue or dressing in something that gives like a nod toward like that authority feeling, I think really helps. I think having like also a role, like say you're at a dinner party and you need to be a dinner party guest. Dressing like a dinner party guest is not going to hurt. It's going to
Yeah.
help kind of just give that feeling. I think subtle nods to things really do help. But
Mhm.
like if you're auditioning for like a nurse, you don't have to come in a nurse's uniform, for
No.
example. But I think that helps us, have like a little bit of a nod if you wear something like blue. So it's like just the general feeling, giving your understanding to us of like what you see this character being. I also think for props, like I think for me, I find it a little bit more distracting when someone uses their hand instead of like a phone, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
I find having a physical prop for that sort of circumstance actually quite helpful.
Mhm.
Or say you're like someone who's like a ditzy girl who's like smacking her gum and stuff, like have some gum, like
Yeah,
if
yeah.
it's in the script, I think it's appropriate to use certain things.
I totally agree with you. Yeah. I think the overuse of props is maybe sometimes a bit too much, but things like using your hand instead of a gun to me is just off-putting, and you immediately notice it. And then you think, well, I'm thinking about the fact that they used a hand instead of a gun rather than the quality of the audition.
Yeah, or even like if you have a gun shape of something, like hold it below the camera so you can't see. You can hold
Yeah.
your elbows up so that they get the impression of what you're trying to do. But yeah, I would suggest never bring in even a prop gun to an audition, especially not in America for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would suggest against bringing any weapons of any kind
Yeah.
into an audition, even if it's fake. It gives a impression sometimes that can be off-putting to the team.
So let's say an actor was self-taping for Lainey Lipson. What would be your turn-offs when it comes to the self-tape? Are there certain things that you see in self-tapes and you think, oh, no, I wouldn't have done that?
I would say it's hard because it feels like everyone has their totally own way of doing something. And I think self tapes are very specific to who you are as an actor.
Mm.
I think for self tapes that I've seen before, I think when someone comes in with an apology that's recorded on the tape of, oh, I'm sorry this is late, or I'm sorry, blah, 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 like, or giving an explanation of something that maybe their agent hasn't even relayed to casting that could surprise us. I think that's what can put someone off about like their slate to begin with.
Yeah.
I think about the tape, if you overdo a tape and make it a whole cinematic production, I think that takes away our ability to be able to really show that to the team because you've already made their project essentially. And I think that that takes away their ability to envision you in their world.
Yeah.
I think having also something that's underdone, so having something that's quite dark lighting, someone who's maybe reading quite noticeably off the script, I think that also can be quite off-putting.
Mhm.
So as long as you are lit well and prepared and don't give more than you need to, other than maybe a little introduction about yourself, I think that that is plenty for us. Yeah.
So, of course, if the self-tape goes well, normally the recalls are either done in person or on Zoom, which is a new thing, doing these Zoom recalls. How do you find the Zoom recalls? Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? Are there things that actors should watch out for when doing them?
Yeah, Zoom recalls actually have been extremely helpful during the pandemic. I've really enjoyed being able to meet people in a more informal way almost because I feel like sometimes in an audition room, there's a bit more pressure. And I think virtually, it just takes off a little bit of the pressure of being in your own environment, but still being able to have this face to face time. I would say that the challenges with that are technical difficulties that might not be able to be handled in the moment. So maybe your computer crashes or maybe your internet goes down either on either end. And then suddenly this audition process is made a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
And then also nerve-wracking for an actor. I can imagine if something goes wrong, you immediately feel like it's your fault, but it's not your fault. It's just part of this new process of things. I would say also doing chemistry reads over Zoom has been very interesting because you do get a sense of the chemistry, but it's not the same as people facing each other in a room,
Yeah.
obviously. So I think that to me is quite difficult to envision sometimes if you can't see two people, like say they're in a romantic scene and they need to be having a really serious discussion. You want to see that connection eye to eye. And when you see them on two squares side by side, it's a little bit more challenging.
Yeah.
Um, but I'd say the benefits are like we've had lots of different more like open call sort of processes, things with younger children, like callbacks and stuff for various roles that are just a little bit more tricky. And through that, we've been able to really work with people and even sometimes for a bit longer than we would have in the room. Because we can dedicate this time online, not have to move ourselves, not have to do these different things to be able to like prepare for this session.
Mm.
Anyone can join from around the world at any time. We can make the time zones all align. And sometimes, like, say we were doing a casting session in LA, but we had to fly someone out from the UK and say they can come anymore for any reason. Then they
Yeah.
could still join in. But meanwhile, in the past, you would just be missing that person. So it has opened up some opportunities and has opened up the ability to have people more involved from the whole creative team, which
Mhm.
has been really, really awesome.
Yeah. One of the classic phrases you hear in this industry, well, there's two really. It's not about who what you know, it's about who you know, and about being in the right place in the right time. What do you think is important when it comes to networking for actors? You know, how should actors go about networking with casting directors, say?
I would say just being friendly, being yourself, and also being able to reach out, but knowing the frequency in which to reach out. I
Mhm.
would say some people overreach out and it becomes a thing where it's like, oh, here's this actor again. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something where it makes us not as invested in reading that singular email if we've just heard from you 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I would say like knowing to, keep messaging like maybe like once every couple of months. If you have an update about something that's happened in your career, whether it's a booking, a new class, a short film, a feature film, whatever it is, a show that you're in that you're inviting us to, whatever. It's really amazing to be able to connect in that way because you never know when we have something at that time that's casting that you might be perfect for.
Yeah.
And, then it provides you an opportunity you might not have been expecting in that very moment. But also just creating a relationship and maintaining a relationship as humans, I think it's really important too. Not just seeing it as this exchange, because I feel like seeing each other as humans really helps. So like not just updating about career, like even giving like a little personal update. Like I've just moved and I'm really enjoying my new home and blah blah blah. Like
Mhm.
that gives us a little bit of you. And I think like making it friendly and personable, but still keeping it professional, I think is a really good way to keep in touch.
Yeah, and do you think social media plays a big part of that? Do you think actors should be working with casting directors over social media? Obviously, there's the thing at the moment where having a lot of followers on social media can work in your favor, career wise. But do you think it's good for actors to be networking with casting directors on social media?
Well, it's interesting you brought up the thing about followers. Personally, I've never really worked on anything that followers have come into play.
Okay.
I've never really had the moment where, like, our casting team specifically is looking at you thinking, this person has 150,000 followers, this person has 10,000, so we're of course going for the person with more followers. No, we're going to go for the person who has, the talent that we need and who has, the things that we're looking for that
Yeah.
specific role. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if the studio teams or the producers of any kind have ever looked in that direction, but I know that personally I've never had that be a requirement of a role. But I would say keeping in touch via social media can be one of two things. It can be very helpful if you, again, have something relevant to share or you're interacting in a way that is supportive or helping kind of other actors off of a post of a casting director. I would say generally getting in touch to share like lengthier messages and materials and asking for advice for me isn't as doable over social media. I think I'd prefer to have it in email format because it
Yeah.
keeps it kind of all in one place. I think sometimes when you get messages on Instagram and Twitter and various places, it kind of becomes hard to keep track of who's following you where. So it's nice
Yeah.
to have like the centralized place of communication in email. But I
And I think,
think,
yeah, I think also being aware that casting directors use their social media for personal use as well, and
yeah.
not to bombard them.
Yeah, exactly. Like for me on Instagram, for example, I'm open to people, getting in touch via Instagram stuff if they have something specific that they're getting in touch about. But I
Yeah.
would say that is a more personal page for me. Like, so everyone feels differently about this. Some people have a casting specific page,
Mm.
and that's one thing. Having something that is a little bit more personal infused with casting, that's another thing. So I think just be aware of who you're contacting and how you're contacting them in that sort of situation, but
Yeah.
I would say I'm generally a very open person when it comes to contact, so.
Right. A little bit more about you. What's your career highlight and why?
Oh, that's a really difficult one, because I've had 2 different stages of my career almost in
Yeah.
LA and here. I would say a highlight would probably be getting to work on many projects at once at one stage in LA. I would say that gave me the sense of just being able to explore multiple worlds at once and fulfill multiple creative briefs and getting to meet such a variety of people and dealing with really complex sort of situations in certain roles. I would say like we'd be working on one comedy show, a horror show, an adventure show, and it would just be this kind of like world building that our office was all a part of. And I think that was a really special defining moment for me, realizing like this is something I really get excited about. And
Yeah.
I get excited about watching the people who are coming in. I would say also a defining moment would be coming over here and just starting in this new sort of side of the industry and getting to explore in a different way. I would say the UK industry is very friendly in terms of like how we deal with actors and the communication with actors. So I think having that openness
Yeah.
has been really lovely and like helped me kind of reframe how I want to operate in casting.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Can you, off the back of your career highlight, can you remember a really memorable audition, and why was it memorable?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a few in my mind that whenever I've been asked this, they would really stick out. Like this one woman, she was coming in to read for us and came in totally like perky and sweet. And then all of a sudden, she said before she wanted to go into her scene, she was going to walk out the door and walk in as her character. So I was like, okay. let's see what happens here. She
Yeah.
walked out the door and it was like a new person had come in the room. It was like all the energy in her had been like zapped out perfectly for this character. She had like this hollowness in her eyes all of a sudden and just really like dedicated herself from the moment she like came into the room to the moment she left the room in a
Mm.
way that I haven't experienced before. Like her tears became all of our tears, like her emotions became all of our emotions because of her definite like enthusiasm for this role. You could tell that she like was in love with this part, and it really contributed to us all kind of falling in love with her performance. And when we gave her a note as well, it's like it didn't even break. It was just still there, and it ended up becoming this new thing as well after the note that we didn't even know she could get there.
Yeah.
And it was just I think certain people just come in with such a clear vision of who they want the character to be that it really just like takes you back and just makes you feel like that's what was supposed to happen. And it's indescribable. I think some people come in and do an amazing job, but maybe you don't feel like they're the character. And
Yeah.
she was this person.
I think from an actor's point of view, sometimes people feel like if they go too far, they may be negating what the writer has written or negating the ideas of the director by going too far down a character route. Do you think that's a thing or?
I think in person, I think coming in with a strong vision can be beneficial because we can always direct you out to another side of that vision to
Mhm.
like more of what the director or writer might want. I think over self-tape, it's sometimes a little bit more challenging because you don't want to be so direct with your vision because you're trying to leave it open because you're not having that communication. So I think sending in like two different takes is extremely helpful for us. So something that is a little bit more neutral and something that's a bit more specific. I think having like two different sides of how this could go is really helpful for us because then it provides that direction taking that we couldn't necessarily give in that moment for that initial audition.
Yeah, yeah. Just to add on to that, obviously when auditions are sent out to actors, they get a certain amount of information about the character and about the project. But I'm finding from an agent's perspective, the further we go on, the less and less information we're being given to the point now where some casting directors are asking us not to even they're asking to send the sides directly to the actor so that even the agent doesn't get to see them. Do you find that this is a thing? And maybe I mean, I know the answer why, but maybe you can explain to our listeners why you think the answer for that is.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the project again, because some projects have very heavy requirements with NDAs. And I
Mm.
think NDAs really lock you down as casting. It locks down what you're able to provide to actors. I know that we've had roles recently where we've had to provide an NDA to a kid, their parent, and whoever was reading with them. Whoever had access to this script needed to sign an NDA,
Yeah,
and that also needed to be contained to a very small number of people. We've also been told in certain situations that you can't have a coach, you can't have a reader. It needs to just needs to be between the child and their parent, and the agent, and just
yeah,
keep that all between you. So it can be really complicated sometimes because we want to provide more information in certain situations because the more information we provide, the better you're going to be as an actor and the better your agent can guide you
yeah,
and know what we're looking for. So I would say in the offices that I've worked in, we always try to give the absolute maximum information. If someone calls and asks as well, we'll give you everything that we're allowed to give.
mhm,
We really work hard to make sure that you are supported as well in the process as an actor and that you're getting the proper information. And that if you feel like you don't have the proper information, I would say the only thing you can really do is make a decision and stick to that decision and hope that it's going to be something that is in the direction that we're looking for because also sometimes we don't know the direction we're looking for, so you can
yeah,
provide that to us.
yeah. Cool. Okay. How do you generally find actors for your projects? So, from a casting point of view, do you just advertise them on the casting sites, or do you do reach outs to certain agents that you work with? How does your process normally work?
Yeah, so I think we've done a really large variety in the offices that I've worked in. So we've done various casting websites from Spotlight to eTalenta to Cast Upload to Breakdown Services, everything that you could possibly think of. I think we've posted casting calls on. I would say generally though, we do mainly casting websites, and then also we'll reach out directly to agencies in kind of a broader scope for certain roles that might be a little bit more challenging, reaching out to people in Europe and different places in the US as well, via email directly. Also, we'll look for people via open calls, so releasing things on social media and having you
Mhm.
apply to our emails directly and being able to then take the process from a direct email. I would say, yeah, also we've reached out to casting programs and acting schools. We've worked with various different youth programs as well from
Mhm.
across the UK, and also back in the US. We looked into lots of different acting programs from many different states as well, trying to gather who the recent graduates are. So, yeah, we've taken all sorts of avenues to
Yeah.
find people. And it just depends really on how challenging the role is, and
Mhm.
also if we think we can find that role within the place that we're currently in, or if we need to go elsewhere because maybe there's a different language spoken, a different kind of appearance, a different sort of just requirement that might not be so easily found just right here where we are.
Mhm. So let's talk to statistics. Say, for example, you were to put a supporting role in a TV show on Spotlight. How many applications would you expect to get, and how many would you then audition from that number?
Yeah, I think it does vary because when you say supporting role, I feel like it could be different based on if it's a role that has one line or if it's a role that has 10 lines.
Okay.
So I think like if it's a role with one line, generally we get a lot of like younger, newer actors being submitted for that,
Mhm.
or people who are just trying to get their career really on a roll with some good TV credits. So I would say generally we'd have a couple thousand sometimes, or if it's more specific, we might only have a couple hundred.
Mhm.
So it really depends on the role and what the role requires. So um, if it's like a 20-year-old person who speaks Arabic and also can juggle and also can ride a horse and also can swim, like naturally that's going to be a much smaller pool than
Yeah.
um 25-year-old woman with brown hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think like naturally that will be a lot more, specific to go with more specific attributes. But yeah, I would say it can be a wide variety of people, but
Mhm.
I personally look through every single page of Spotlight, and also whenever it's possible to release it to the wider sort of community on Spotlight, so directly to actors. I really enjoy doing that because then you can meet people who might not be represented yet, or might just feel this role is right for them and suggest themselves.
Mhm.
So I think, yeah, we try to keep it broad, but also we try not to consistently just go for the same people. I know some people like to have a little bit more of that consistency, but I think we like to see, some new faces and get a little bit broader with our searches.
So if this was a, let's just say a five-line role in an American TV show that you're casting, how many auditions do you reckon normally you would send out?
So I think for about five-line role, I would say it would be like around 30 people,
Okay.
because everyone reads it in such a different way.
Mhm.
I think the smaller the role, weirdly enough, we probably do more tapes than bigger roles, unless it's like a series regular or something that is a lot more challenging to find the right person for. But I would say, yeah, probably about 30 to 40 people generally we would get on tape. And then from there, we'd narrow it down to about 10 people, then we would narrow it down to, the last five people to kind of show to the team. And then the team will kind of guide us from there with what they're looking for.
Got you. Okay. This next question probably relates to you more than most, having had an acting career in the past. But how do you think an actor can go about making waves in the industry? Obviously, the industry is very overpopulated. There are lots and lots of actors out there. How do you think an individual actor can go about, making waves?
Yeah, I mean, I think that everyone can make a wave in a different way, like, because that can be defined in a few different ways. I would say if you can create your own projects, whether that's producing something, writing something, acting in something, whatever it is, and find a good community of people to consistently work with creatively, I think that's a really good way to kind of make yourself known in the way you want to be known. I would say creating like short films, even like 2-minute short films, and getting those around to festivals, getting them out just into the world and having your very specific vision kind of marked onto that, I
Mm.
think is really a good way to kind of just start getting yourself known in the world. And
Mm.
also, someone will connect with you if it's a very personal statement coming from you. And I think that, yeah, connection is a really big part of getting yourself known as an actor in terms of just like who can connect with you on an emotional and personal level.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, and then also just getting into various communities within the acting community, like spreading yourself wide and being able to, get to know people who aren't just actors, getting to know filmmakers, getting to know their process. I would say like making waves can be all these little ripples then going into a wave, because I think
Mm.
the more ripples you create, the more likely it is that you're going to have something kind of explode for yourself.
Excellent. I like that. The more ripples you create, the more waves will come. That's great. Right. This is a question that we ask everybody that comes on to the podcast. If you could change one thing about the industry, what would it be and why?
That's very
We get
hard.
so many varied answers to this, but it's a really interesting
Yeah.
question.
Um, if I could change one thing, I think I would say to take a breath, industry, because I feel like the industry moves so fast sometimes, and people often feel like certain things get left behind, or like they're getting left behind, or whatever it is. And I just think sometimes it would be nice just to have a little bit more of like a moment to process things, to be able to
Yeah.
work on things for actors, like for a couple more days on a self tape, or be able to kind of work in a process where we could, have a little bit more communication directly with actors and agents, and be able to like have a more of a process sometimes.
Mhm.
And I think that's for every aspect of the industry. I think everyone having more time to have a process, I think, would be helpful.
Yes,
Um,
definitely.
I
And
know
I
you asked
totally
for,
agree.
and I know you asked for one thing, but I would say also just like people generally being a little bit more, just understanding that everyone's a human, and
Mhm.
everyone goes through things, and everyone has their challenges and their massive wins, and life is a roller coaster. And I think having a little bit more of an understanding of that, from everyone's perspective, I think would be amazing.
Yeah, remembering we're dealing with people and not products, I think is definitely a big thing. Right, last question. If you could give actors one piece of advice, what would it be?
Hmm. I would say my biggest piece of advice would probably be to not apologize for yourself, and to find what makes you feel good about yourself in every situation, and pat yourself on the back for the things that you achieve that you feel could be this small or it could be giant. It doesn't
Mm.
really matter. I would say giving yourself the ability to be proud of yourself for even the smallest things, I think would be very essential as an actor. Because I think sometimes when you apologize for who you are, or apologize for how you've done something, or feel bad about something, it can linger within you. And so I think finding the things to be proud of, in every single day, every single situation, every audition, I think it is really important. So yeah, just say like, wow, I learned my lines really well for that. Or wow, in that one moment in the audition, I felt really connected. And just find those things to hold on to, and know that whatever you do next, you're going to keep that thing that you did well from the last time and grow from there.
Yeah. Perfect. Great answer. Great answer. Well, Lainey, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for your insight. That was really, really valuable. So yeah, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.